Welcome. This meeting is being webcast live and recorded. The recording or webcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Here's the October 23rd, 2024 regular meeting agenda. A motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call. Valerie? Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
Patty? Aye. And I. Report. Middle School. Bailey Gomez.
Good evening, District Administrators, parents, and community members. My name is Bailey Gomez, and I'm the AAC President at Johnny Middle School. Let's get ready to share some of the great things that are going on my campus. The second quarter at Johnny Middle started this week, and parents found this expected to Red Village is next week, and there will be a number of activities as well as dress-up-days to encourage our students to remain dress-free. This Friday night, during next student council class will be judging the pumpkin carving contest at the annual Trunk or Treat night in downtown Corcoran. Next, we have fall sports results. Our girls volleyball made the SAL semifinals. Our flag football made the SAL semifinals. In the cross country SAL finals, our boys team took second place and the girls team took third place to finish off a great fall sports season for the welfare. The next sports season is already underway with our boys and girls soccer teams as well as the finish line of the season. Some of our upcoming events on campus including the wrestling and soccer rallies on November 13th and our spa dance on November 20th. To finish, I'd like to wrap up with a spotlight on the January band and the big spotlight on the The January March season has had a busy month. First, we had the honor of representing our school in this year's conference. It was a joy to play for our high school community and share our hard work with family and friends. The January marching band also competed in this year's Marcellia Band Invitational, marching against schools from all over the southern Central Valley. Many must perform strongly and took home third place, establishing our music programs as a central contender while shining a positive light on the city of Corcoran. Be sure to add the BHS and journalists, drummers and marching band showcase to your calendars at 6 p.m. on November 7th at the CJUSD. Thank you for your continued support of the journalist music program and fine arts education in Corcoran Unified School District.
Thank you. Superintendent report.
Yes, first off, good job, Amy. Did a great job. And board president Bill Clinton, members of the board, as you know, we saw here in John Muir, we have a lot of great things. And so, it's great to see that our visual performing arts, our sports, they're all excelling. I want to take a moment just to recognize Steve Brown for the contribution he made to our Christian community. I know we talked about that before, but today was a memorial. And so it's great to see a lot of community out there really just honoring his legacy and the legacy he did leave. I had the pleasure of working with him, and he was very welcoming to me when I first came back in February, and I really appreciated that about him. What's so true and was reported many times was that he was a man who has the joy and energy of a young person. Right? That was in many of the stories that they talked about today. His passion was his service to all of our students, and he would do anything to make sure that our students had every opportunity to succeed. Thank you, Mr. Brown and his family, for giving him to us for over 40 years. You know, corporate the town is filled with pride, but we also have some adults who are not taking pride necessarily in our community. We posted the following statement today on social media with partnership from corporate PD. And I want to thank the city and Chief Ochoa because they've been amazing partners, and we're constantly in communication, texting, calling, and just to make sure that we're both on the same page. So we posted this today, and it's that creating safe, inclusive, and welcoming schools is our priority. Yesterday, some adults off campus didn't demonstrate the behavior we strive for, and our students look for us as role models. It's crucial that we as adults show what it means to be positive role models in our community. This week, we're increasing staff on campus, but we need our families' help. Families let's work together by setting the right example and reporting behavior that doesn't align with our values. Together, we will make our community a corporate safe and welcoming for all. Although we have a few adults like informed in our community and on social media, we know, and I know, that they do not represent the entirety of corporate, and we saw that today, right, in you know, Mr. Brown's service. Many people who have just really given to our community. And our students are looking to us as adults from this room, to this boardroom, to their classroom, and even within the community as a whole, to be role models for them. The more that we can band together to give back joy and a sense of adventure, just like Mr. Brown did, then we can truly call corporate a destination community and district. We will be aligning the dismissal process at all elementary schools with families picking up students at the gate. This will begin on Monday, October 28th. That part, the teachers were given some training today and kind of the update on board that, how that's going to happen. So in the meantime, we have staff that are there every day to help and support. I'll let the data I'm going to share speak to the work we're doing today a little bit later. We will be transparent. Are there 5 to 4 students who are misbehaving on campus? Yes. You know, that happens in every district. But those numbers are decreasing thanks to our amazing staff and families. We still have a lot of room to grow, don't get me wrong, right? It's not the place where we want to be. But the thing is that we're seeing some movement, and that's really a testament to our leaders, to our staff, at the school site, teachers, classified, we're all pushing in to try to make our site amazing places for our students. We still have a lot of room to grow, but the more we can focus on providing a joy for learning and a sense of adventure with our students at each of our schools, then we will see true transformational change. I'm excited for our future. Together we can provide each of our students with opportunity for success. I yield my time, President.
Thank you. There's no Corporate Faculty Association report. The trustees. We're in receipt of the Corporate Faculty Association report. California School Employees Association, CSEA. Presentation.
Everybody, can you hear me?
Yes.
It took a little while. Okay, so good afternoon, board members and administration. Dulce Sandoval, chapter president. Boy, has the weather changed quite quickly from the high 90s to the mid 60s. This week and next week, our schools are celebrating Red Ribbon Week with some very fun and interesting dress-up days. I want to acknowledge the quick response from our security staff yesterday with the incident that took place at Bret Harte after school. The quick action of site staff along with the security staff assisted in the quick de-escalation of the situation, and no students or staff were harmed. The question still remains as to why parents have been allowed to go past the gates. I'm glad this is changing soon, but it should not have taken this type of incident to get the site administration to make this change. Our 24-25 negotiations have begun, and we've met 3 times so far with the district. It is quite a pleasant change from past negotiation experiences. The dialogue is there, asking questions, and mutual respect to listen to the explanations behind our proposals. We hope this is just the start of a strong foundation for future negotiations. I once again want to express the need and the importance of reviewing our paraprofessional/instructional aid needs in addition of different types of paras, such as preschool, TK, and special education. We are one of the very few districts left with only one job description for all our paraprofessional needs and roles. We hope you can join us on Friday for our trunk or treat and come out to support our Corcoran High School Panthers football team. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you. Presentation, School Services of California, SSC, Sarah Neiman.
Okay, so Dr. Neiman's getting on the screen and getting ready. This is the presentation from the workshop that we had last month in September. And so she's coming to bring that same presentation as a request from the board. So that this is going to be that presentation as well. Okay.
Thank you. And do I have permission to share my screen, or is it going to be loaded for me? I don't have permission right now.
He's getting into the brief.
There we go. You guys able to see that?
Yeah.
Yes? Great. All right. So good evening, Board President De La Fuente, School Board, Superintendent Pacina, Cabinet, and community. I'm thrilled to be back here again. As Superintendent Pacina shared, this is an abridged version of what we talked about a few months ago in our study session. It looks really long in the presentation, and I just want you to know that I kept some of the slides in because I know that the public wants to be able to access all of the information. And so some of the slides I might go through a little bit faster, but it's only because I want to talk about kind of the meat of the presentation, but I wanted to make sure that the community had the full picture. And again, this is a summary of a report that School Services completed. We were asked to come in and evaluate the organizational structure, do a comparison with other school districts, and do a staffing review of the district functions. So we looked at the operations side, right, business, fiscal, transportation, maintenance, HR and technology, and then the educational services side, so including special ed and health services. In doing our review, we take a look at documentation, we conducted interviews with staff, we take a look at analysis of data from other school districts that are identified to be like districts to Corcoran, and we make recommendations based on efficiency, assignment of work, and kind of job alignment. Some background about the district. You are, like most school districts in the state, experiencing some declining enrollment. Overall, about 4% from 2018-19 to 23-24. You had some fluctuations, so it makes it a little bit harder to see an exact trend. But from 22-23 to 23-24, we did see a decline in your enrollment. The average for the state is a decline of 2.3%. So you are right there with them. We compared the following districts when we did our analysis. So you can see we take a look at districts that are like size, similar in UPP, unduplicated pupil count. And then we don't take a look at educational data as part of our comparison, but we did put it in here so that you could see where you rank with ELA and math. But it's not part of our analysis. We're looking really at district makeup. So Bassett, Cutler, Delhi, Farmersville, and Kanaki were the districts that we compared to. We took a look at the overall district office staffing. So I'd like to call your attention to the first row that says rank. You can see that for all employees in the district office, you rank number 6 out of 6 school districts, which means you have the least amount of staff to support the students and the work that you do. We take a look at the total FTEs, it's just above that, and we divide that by enrollment to determine how many FTE full-time equivalent are supporting your student population. And so you have 71.58 adults, staff at the district office supporting your students. And that is, like I said, ranked number 6. So we know that there was room to grow in the district office just based on the comparables. We'll talk about budget and finance, food services, and transportation and maintenance. This is kind of the operations side of the house first. So when we look at business services, you rank number 5 of 6. You're going to see this type of chart for every category, right? So similar to the one I talked to just a second ago, we take the total FTE assigned to the department, we take that FTE and we divide it by the number of students, and we come up with the enrollment per FTE. And that's how we know if your staffing ratio is where you rank in staffing ratio. So when you look at fiscal services, you're 4 out of 6, food services 3 out of 6, transportation and maintenance 4 out of 6. Overall Department of Business Services would be 5 out of 6. Okay. We had some key observations that are shared here. Much of that is about the oversight of the CBO. The scope of responsibility is pretty extensive. So there's a lot of responsibility under the CBO's oversight, and there's not a lot of management staffing to support fiscal services, which means that the CBO has to get involved in lower level transactions. That creates a problem, right? When we talk about the CBO or any leadership's position is really to lead, vision, plan, and when they're tasked with doing lower level work and more transactional work, then it takes away from that leadership role. You're going to hear this theme throughout the presentation. I equated it in our study session to, if you think of a principal, right? A principal has a lot to do in terms of visioning, curriculum instruction, instructional leadership on a school site. But if they're subbing in a classroom every day, then they don't have time to get back to the parents, to plan the PD, to lead the curriculum work and the instructional work of the school and move the vision forward, because their entire day is in the classroom. It's similar to that type of analogy. We have a lot of management positions in this district that are having to do work in a position that's not really theirs, that's taking away time from the higher level leadership positions. Because of that, you've had some vacancies in this department, and I know that you've filled your CBO position, so that's great. When we talk about recommendations, we made some recommendations in the report to restructure the management staffing with the business services department. The configuration includes the executive leadership of the CBO, a director of fiscal services, and a fiscal manager. All of these positions would be management. The technical group needs to be examined a little bit more to provide a comprehensive service model for fiscal services. And we made some adjustments to the HR business assistant position, to that FTE allotment, because it's hard to be split between both jobs, and really those positions should be split. We suggested that you assess the feasibility of adding a technical or analytical position to the business services department, such as a budget analyst, to support the work of that department. In food services are impacted by recruitment capabilities. This is a struggle for your district in general. I got to visit in a unique geographic area. There's not a lot of cities around you, a lot of resources around you, and so you are really recruiting very, very locally. And so recruitment is impacted. You don't staff a management position directly related responsible for transportation. And so transportation and maintenance is lumped together. And then you have intense custodial needs. And there's a lot of times that we found that there's not coverage or support, which means that the classrooms are not being cleaned. So we recommend that you examine the class food compensation structure to determine if it's competitive. And also streamline the subsidy pay structure to encourage your current classified subs to work in various classifications. I know lots of districts where the employees work in wear multiple hats. We recommend that you should assess staffing in the transportation and maintenance department to see if you can add an additional manager to assist with operational oversight and the supervision of school staff. It should be a management level position with a title of maintenance and operations supervisor to convey the role of the position. I want to say, and I said this in our study session, all of these are just recommendations for you to really evaluate and reflect on. We don't come in and make any sort of determinations. But what was interesting about your district in particular, it is the district in which we have recommended the most positions be added out of any district we worked with. And so we see a need here for you as a board to evaluate where you think that the biggest needs are. So in HR, there are minimal staffing resources to support the function. If you take a look at the rank, it's number 4 out of the 6. But you have 0.5 clerical staff. You have department staff of 1. That's not a lot of people to do the work. The district provides 3 total people to support HR. And as we talked about in our study session, HR does so much more than just hiring and recruiting, right? They're responsible for so many aspects of the operations of the district. There is an HR manager, and she is responsible for the HR department. The specialist was vacant during the field work, and when we talked about it at the study session, we realized that position's probably been floating around in the position control for a while and not actually a position, which means you really don't have 3 positions. You have less than that. The current oversight structure of the HR department is not really functioning. It doesn't provide a level of supervision necessary to operate an HR services department within the district. That person needs to have a certain level of responsibility and authority to really sign off on the amount of liability that the district has. When we conducted our interviews, we found that staff perceive the department struggles to meet employment needs, and the difficulties are attributed to the staffing levels within the department. So they were not complaints about the individual people that were working the department. It was more that they felt that HR was understaffed. We emphasize that it's really important that additional staff don't just solve the problem, right? Sometimes we have problems and most districts just throw people at it and it never actually solves the problem. In our report, you see it's written in 2 parts. So we did an organizational structure review, and then there's also a section that's really about HR and recruitment that has detailed recommendations. And so if you're going to throw people in that department or add people to that department, it's important that they're doing the right work, they're trained how to do the right work so that it can be effective, because putting more people in there just to plug a hole is not going to solve the problem, right? So we recommend that you consider reorganizing the HR department, that you restructure the HR leadership and staff it as a director of HR position. We're not recommending that you add an additional manager. We're recommending that you reclassify the current position and give the scope of authority to that position. And then there should be an HR assistant position. If we're taking that split person out of business and HR, moving them completely into business, that's going to leave a bigger hole in HR. So we recommend adding 1.0 FTE to support that department. And this is one of our priorities for the district to consider because there's a lot of, again, liability, compliance that goes through an HR department. And Ed Services, Ed Services is our foundation for student outcomes. That's why we're all here, right? So our kiddos learn, our little learners learn. In the current organizational structure, we found it to be really decentralized. And as it operates, you had your assistant superintendent, and then you had these other directors or supporting managers, but they were very isolated in doing siloed type of work, and they weren't really focused on instruction. You do have a lot of instructional support at the school sites that we think needs to be centralized. There is that clear kind of lack of support of staff and reporting structure within that department. And so there's a recommendation in a new organizational chart that you'll see in the report. And this kind of decentralized department contributes to the communication breakdown that we heard about in the department. And when I say communication breakdown, it's not that everyone is not communicating individually, but it's that they're communicating individually, and sometimes it's different information. And that's because it's not all housed under one one roof, right, with a common message. In ed services, you do rank last. You're 6 out of 6 in terms of supporting staff. You are the only district that does not have a clerical support person for ed services, which means that a lot of the clerical work is being done by your managers. They're working managers, and so there is a recommendation to add staff to support the clerical needs of the department. We recommend that you centralize the instructional oversight and the reporting structure. There's also a recommendation to include or to add a director of curriculum and instruction. That person would report directly to the assistant superintendent, supervise the principals and the instructional coaches, and help manage the personnel and ed services. There's, like I said, I mentioned clerical support for the managers. When, just like that principal, if your ed services superintendent is doing all of the paperwork and all of the purchase orders and all of the conference, conference applications or whatever it might be, is taking away his ability to lead and plan. And then we recommend that you move the Department of Special Services under the supervision of the assistant superintendent. That puts all learning for all kids in one department. And so you've got our general education and our special education kiddos that could all be under the same leader. It'll help with curriculum planning, professional development planning, aligning the goals of student outcomes for your district. This is a very common structure that we see, especially in smaller districts where the director of special ed or special services in this case falls under the assistant superintendent of ed services. Special services and health services is so crucial in a school district. You have a high need for safety and resources for your learners, and you have a high need for special ed in your district. Your department is spread very thin to meet these needs, and so I talk a lot in the report about redefining what these services are. Again, these director positions act as clerical support or case carriers, or they sit in a lot of IEPs and they sit in a lot of meetings that wouldn't necessarily fall right on their plate. So we recommend some significant changes for this department. Special services and health services in terms of comparative data ranks 5 out of 6. Special ed and student services is tricky because not all districts group these two together, right? It's very common that student services, what you call health services, is assigned separately outside of special education. So the alignment is not perfect, but what we do know is that this department is understaffed. We recommend that you separate the two, that you create a director of student services. You have a management position already that does a lot of this work, and so be elevating that position, and then renaming the director of special services to special education, because that's really what that person is responsible for. This would allow you to reassign student health and wellness, all the wellness centers, counseling, 504s, study teams, all of that stuff that falls under student services would go to that director of student services. And then under special education, a program specialist, that is a certificated management position, very common position we see in school districts. That position would support the work of special education. Compliance, in the course of our interviews, we found that, or we heard that there are some compliance issues that the department has been dealing with. As you know, compliance and liability is a big deal in special education. So we recommend that program specialist to help with that. And then the safety department, which currently falls under HR, would be reassigned to that special services department, reporting to the director of student services. That recommendation only makes sense if you do go ahead with the director of student services addition. Technology, I heard glowing things about technology. I heard that the technology department has, systems in place, a ticket system that they feel works effectively and that customers feel work effectively. you do use Apple products. And so because of that, your learners have access to high tech quality, but sometimes when they're broken, they have to be outsourced to a vendor rather than repaired in-house. And this is another department where the managers are working managers. They answer help desk tickets and they do all of the clerical work for the department. And they have been able to manage it. Is it ideal? Probably not, but they have been able to manage it. We recommend technology. It was previously under the superintendent, that it falls directly under the CBO. Your business officer or assistant superintendent would typically be overseeing all of the operational departments, and technology is one of them. The director of technology would still be on cabinet, but the day-to-day direction wouldn't come directly from Superintendent Pacini, it would come from the CBO. And then review the ticket system. If you are resolving most of your tickets in-house versus outsourced, then you may be staffed appropriately. If most of your work orders are managed outside, you might want to look at that as well. So this is part of a kind of a homework assignment that I'm giving you guys and giving the technology department, just to see if the balance of work is appropriate for the amount of staff that you have. It's not apples to apples, because when you compare technology with the other school districts aren't necessarily outsourcing all of the or most of the repairs for their equipment. So here you rank 3. But is that appropriate just based on how much repair you outsource? To improve the outcomes, we've got to address a new organizational structure, right? So we put in your report a whole new district office organizational chart, and it shows some realignment of a reporting structure. When you, or if you implement any of these, you need an implementation plan that would allocate or reallocate workload. And as part of that implementation plan, when you create the responsibilities, it needs to be communicated out so people know, right? That this is now under the Director of Student Services. This is what they're responsible for. This is what special ed is responsible for. This is the reporting structure if you have a Director of Curriculum and Instruction, right? So you can't just create it without communicating out what this looks like now for everybody. And then we make this recommendation a lot. You should be evaluating your staffing levels on a periodic basis, right? To make sure it's still appropriate with the district's priorities and goals, appropriate with the financial resources that you have. One of the questions that one of the trustees asked me in the study session is, how did we get to this point where we're so understaffed? And I don't know the answer, right? But I do think that before you get to this place where you're so understaffed or so overstaffed, having this regular check-in where you're periodically evaluating whether or not you're staffed appropriately would help alleviate some of the strain on the district office or the budget, just depending. And then, as I said, we did a whole other analysis on the HR department and the review of hiring practices. It's a lot longer than the few slides I'm going to share tonight, but we spent some time talking about this in our study session. So we took a look at the policies and procedures and the training practices. We took a look at the recruitment, selection, and onboarding procedures and practices, and we looked at any standardized materials. We also provided a lot of templates for the HR department as a starting point. And so we wanted to really look at the timelines and protocols, reference checking, applicant screening, interview questions, and rating methodologies. Our key observations are not a surprise to you, right? It's hard to find staff. It's hard to find staff in a district that has a lot of resources around, and you don't necessarily have a lot of resources around, right? And so it makes it even harder for you. We also found that a lot of the recruitment efforts are passive, and again, that's not a Corcoran issue. That's what we're finding all over the place. But we used to, pre-COVID, we used to be able to post jobs and then people would just apply, right? And that's just not the case anymore. We have to be active and creative and in our recruitments, and we need to kind of beat our competitors to find the best candidates. Beat them in timeliness, putting postings in places that they might not think of, sending postcards out to local zip codes, whatever it might be. We have to be more active than we have ever had to be in the past. The employee selection process, there have been some revised selection procedures to ensure a fair hiring, and that includes multiple panels and steps. There was also some concerns about confidentiality. We made some recommendations in the report and provided some templates for what confidentiality agreements might look like from an interview panel. And then we realized that the onboarding process could be improved and streamlined so that there's a really positive vibe, positive experience from employees that are recently hired. It could be electronic workflows, new hire paperwork that are integrated through a software platform. I think you might even have some software that could be utilized, and if not, it might be worth the investment because so much of what is done in HR and between HR and the business office can be integrated in a software system that will make the workload for both departments much more doable. So we have some recommendations with HR. Again, this is a very small tidbit of what we shared in the full report. But we really stress the importance of the confidentiality agreement. It's so hard in small towns. I've worked in small towns. I live in small towns where everyone knows everyone. And so the process of confidentiality is very important. The positions should go through an approval process that business services and HR sign off on, right? If it's a new position, it probably should go to the board and cabinet. Hey, we're creating a brand new position. That power shouldn't just sit with one person, right? It shouldn't sit with a principal or a director to say, hey, I need this person. There needs to be oversight in that, and that's where your position control comes in. And I know business and HR will be working on that as they start working on some of these tasks. But if it is a replacement position, you need, your science teacher quit at the high school, and it's a replacement position, and you need that FTE, then business and HR at least need to still sign off on it. It can't just be the principal calling and say, hey, I need a science teacher. There needs to be an approval process. We talk about the training that needs to happen for panel members and then also for hiring managers. How do you recruit? How do you select? How do you go through that whole process, right? And how do you hold a legally compliant, non-discriminatory interview? And then we talk about creating a communication plan that includes engagement with educational partners to address recruitment. So what local agencies can you use to help with recruitment? Do you have, are there local job fairs? Are there community agencies where you can hold something? Are there radio stations where you can promote? Are there local community colleges, four-year colleges that you can pull from? So that's part of that active recruitment component. And with that is a much shorter version of what we spent probably 2.5 hours talking about when we were together last time. But I'll take any questions that you guys have.
This time I heard something a little different. You were talking about the HR and being a 1.5%, and you said we needed to stop them last time, but today I heard you say that that half person was going to be moved over to business. When was that decided? Because that wasn't provided to us at the last meeting.
The business HR FTE person, that move was part of the initial presentation. Because that person is split funded and split workload, right? And so that recommendation was in there in the original report and in the presentation. What came out of our study session was we believed that there was an assigned person, an assigned HR specialist in that department. And when I brought that up in the report or in the presentation, HR kind of looked at me and said, we don't have that position, right? And so it was a position that maybe had been on the books for a while, but had never been staffed. And so it was one of the things that was going to be looked at by the department.
Okay, but you stated that half person would be moved to the business side of it, which to me doesn't make sense. If that person is already in HR, why are we starting with new staff in HR when there's already a person there that can help build that department the way that their director or supervisor would like them to.
Correct. So what Dr. Neiman is just stating is that she's looking at the numbers. So as far as the decision being made on who goes where,
That's not what she
So
said.
that's not what she said.
She said she recommend. So I have a question, Dr. Neiman.
Yeah.
Most of the report, the way I'm reading it, is you're making recommendations on what positions we need.
Mhm.
However, there's the one position in the HR and business services that you are recommending to move to a certain position, to a certain area.
Mm-hmm.
My question to you is, did anybody ask you to make that recommendation in your report? Did anybody ask you to change your report from any drafts that were priorly submitted to the district?
No, it's the split nature of that position that doesn't necessarily work for the two departments. 50-50. Yeah.
I understand that, but the entire report is you're recommending certain positions be added.
Mhm.
That one position, that 0.5 in both those, that is where you're making a recommendation to go to a certain department. And why are you making that recommendation if you didn't even talk to that person?
So my partner evaluated the operational side, right? And so she's looking strictly at FTE, right? There's a need in business and there's a need in HR. And so it's more effective to have individual people assigned to those departments rather than trying to split the work between the two offices. So much of what business and HR does is a check and balance of each other, right? And so when you have one person who has authority in both sides, then you lose that check and balance. So there is the recommendation to move 0.5 to another department. Now, if the board says we'll move the 0.5 over to HR and it can go to business, that's okay too. But the recommendation is that the position not be split any longer. We also made recommendations to increase titles of positions, right? Just based on the need and scope of authority. But the check and balance concern of anyone, right? This is why we don't recommend having directors in charge of business and HR together. The check and balance authority component of having somebody who can determine who gets paid and what they get paid should not be the same person. Does that make sense?
And I understand the concept of having the 1.0 in business services and 1.0 in the HR, which HR is lacking at this time, and I understand that. But my problem is your recommendation to move that person to business services and hire another 1.0 in HR. That's what I'm questioning.
May I jump in?
I'm asking Dr. Neiman, please.
Yeah. So I guess I'm a little unclear on the question only because there's a recommendation to add additional staff to business services as well, and to add staff to HR, right? So each department needs more help. And then the person that is split between the two, we feel that there's more need for more FTE in the business services department than in HR if you add that additional FTE. Does that answer that question?
No.
Okay, so can you ask it again?
Your specific recommendation
Yeah.
was to move the individual in the 0.5 of business services and 0.5 in human resources to move that person into business services. My question is, why would you make that specific recommendation in your report or even when you came to talk to us in the study session?
Yeah, so it's not about people, it's about positions, right? So again, it's just what I said. We recommended adding a position in business, in fiscal, and a position in HR, right? And then you have this one in the middle. So we think that there is more support needed here. So they would have an additional 1.5 FTE, and they would have an additional, HR would have an additional half FTE. That's where we feel the numbers need to fall. So it's more about how much staff do you need in each department.
I understand that you want to move it and put it where they belong, in that area because they need the staffing, but you're also stating that HR needs the same staffing. What I don't understand is why you're taking someone who already knows that position and putting them into business, which I understand they're split. However, why do we want our finance person to start from scratch with new employees instead of having someone who can help them build that department?
Well, because it would be not recommended for you to hire more positions that are split, right? So in order to get the FTE that you would need in each department, if you left that person in both departments, then either you would hire a whole extra person here and a whole extra person, here, and then leave them split. The business office is still going to be kind of understaffed. If
I'm
you
not
hired
saying
an
to make
additional
that person
person, then you would be,
50-50, it's to make that person a whole person for finance.
Yeah, I think if I could interject. So I think, again, Dr. Newman said, the board as a person, so they're just looking at positions, they're third party. And so again, these are just recommendations. We come to the board, so I think we're getting hung up on the person and not so much the position, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Newman.
Yeah.
It's the one in HR and the one in business services. And so I think we're getting caught up on just organization of the person and not so much the position. So even if that's the case, all that they're providing us is recommendations. We're the ones that make the decisions on what's going to happen. And so that's kind of the piece. So they're again, we're kind of saying the same thing, right? We understand it's a one-on-one, right? So I think if we're not hung up on that piece, because at the end of the day, it's going to be here, as a team deciding those things.
Well, I'm highly offended that you're stating that we're looking out for the person versus the position instead, because we're not looking at a person, we're looking at the position.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that it came out that way. That's not my intent. So I just wanted to clarify that's what without putting words in your mouth, but words in your mouth, Dr. Newman.
I'm sorry, if that was directed to me, I'm having a hard time understanding. I couldn't hear it.
Just that it's a one in the HR, one in business services.
Yeah, and when we last spoke at the study session, the recommendation in the report was already to add the one person. That was based on the assumption that other position, the analyst or whatever, the specialist, HR specialist that was in your books was an actual position, right? And so, like I said, there was going to be some digging on that to see if that position was real or budgeted. If it's not, that changes the story, right? Because then you don't have the staffing in HR that we thought you had when we conducted the review.
Did we find out if that was an actual position?
It was when I first came on.
I'm sorry.
It was when I first came on, when I was hired, it was an HR specialist. But then when they restructured the position, my understanding was that it went from an HR specialist FTE to an HR manager FTE. So then my understanding was that it was not an additional added, it was just kind of reclassified. So it wasn't in that FTE as far as the HR specialist is no longer in that.
And that's part of the bigger piece of finding that they have overall around structures like position control and not having a true, wide level position control. That's what we're actually looking to right now. We actually just, I think it was yesterday, the day before, went through a training with school services on the development of position control, which is position type of budgets and not necessarily people, and it's the process that they're saying there, right, that they're that we would be able to answer those questions you're asking. So, so that's part of this, where we're acting on the systems part, not the people part. You know, things that are low-hanging fruit, that are more process and procedures, that's stuff that we're working on right now. Okay.
Other questions?
No other questions.
I want to thank Dr. Neiman for being with us tonight, and also her counterpart, Danielle, who's, we've been, you know, like I said, being part of the training on this report was really helpful. So thank you, Dr. Neiman.
All right. Thank you, guys. You have a wonderful evening.
Right. 2023-24 district data review.
Good evening, Board President Delafuente, members of the board. I'm going to keep an eye on my clock too over here because I'll be able to see it in the back, so just so I'm short with it. So this is 23-24 data review, and so really we're going to look at our priorities, what do we assess, or what do we test, our data, and our certain actions. And so this is the information that I gave to the board, but it's also that we give to the public. This is a public meeting, and so we can look at that. So our priorities are these. I'm not going to read them, but they're the priorities that the board set, and that allows us to have a North Star for our system. So this year, one thing that I've been doing is I've been walking classrooms, we're talking to teachers, or even one day we actually had English teachers, and we're doing the RSUC in the morning. I asked them, you know, how are things going so far? And the one thing that's definitely a point of feedback is that they feel like there's clarity around what they need to do. Okay, that's there, and that's because we share these with them. And the strategies that are there along with them. So why do we test? So when I went to school, in elementary school, we had a CAT stick. I don't know if you guys remember that. You know, Scantron, and you had a book, and you kind of, you know, did that once a year, and it usually happened in March, somewhere around there. I remember it was like rainy, March, April. It wasn't necessarily like now it's in May, you know, type of thing. And so, and they would kind of spread out over time. Now we have other tests, right? They're computerized, it's CAT, right? There's also some other nuanced tests, like for special education and other things, but we're going to look at CAT for today, LPAC, and we're going to look at the CAT, the science test. And so this is a really good kind of thing to look at. Remember when I came in, one of the feedback points for teachers was like, we test way too much, okay? And so what was happening was a lot of the tests were happening in that unit and quarterly kind of, you know, circles. And so what we wanted to do was really say, how many times do we really need to test those? And so we pared it all the way down to 2 tests, okay, at the quarter, right? Now, if a teacher wants to do any of those before the quarter, like a unit test, a weekly test, a daily test, a minute by minute, that's their prerogative, okay? But for us, we're asking for 2 tests only, okay? And we use those 2 tests, one in the fall, one in the spring, to see where our students are at based on the standards. And that's that last circle over there, okay? Now, I could also draw an arrow going back because that's really how this diagram should be, but I'm not going to, you know, alter the diagram that was made by someone else. But those standards should be trickling back all the way back to the student. Are they mastering the standards, right? And so we're going to look at the scores today to see really on the annual test, that last circle, how did students do on the annual test, right? And that's what we want to see. So before we get started, I wanted to show this picture real quick, because although we're going to see bar graphs and all that stuff, those represent these kids that are on this slide, right? They're really kids. They're our kids. They're some of your own students, right, that are here. And so although we look at numbers, know that we're also looking at them student by student, okay? It's not just a high number, but I'm not going to go to student to go on that. So this is LA. So this is a stat chart, and what it shows is every grade level, and it has what the grade level by how many students met or exceeded for each year. So we go back all the way to 14, 15 when the test actually started. And so some highlights are, if you look, in grade 5, we had a little growth. They actually moved up 1 point from last year. They were 27% percent of students meeting or exceeding, now we're at 28. Okay, that's not bad, growth, right? Okay. Also, in sixth grade, we had 19 to 23, which is really good. So sixth grade teachers, you guys are doing a really amazing job there. And then we see kind of slumps in seventh grade and eighth grade, a little dip back. And so those are areas that we want to look at. And we just don't look at meet and exceed. We also look at, what if I'm a student that's a 1? Okay, I'm like far below. But I actually moved within that band like 100 points. That's growth too, right? So even though today I'm only showing you meet and exceed, we also look at students who grew within the band or grew from maybe a 1 to 2, and maybe they didn't hit the 3 or 4, but they're still growing, right? And we're looking at, there are some teachers that they have a lot of 1s in their class, but what happens if they move those 1s to 2s? They did amazing work. But that means those students weren't reading. They didn't know how to write. But now they're really moving the needle. And that's actually even more beneficial than the 3 and 4, because those students are coming in at a really big deficit, right? So know that we're looking at those two. I'm just not sharing that data today. Okay, just in math, it's a little bit, we're very like this, a math is a struggle across the nation. Okay, that's not an excuse though, and we're not going to use that as an excuse. Okay, and so we see that in third grade there was no growth. In fourth grade there was, right, 18 and 24. So what we want to do is see, what did fourth grade teachers do last year that moved the needle for those students? And how can we do the same thing in third grade, second grade, first grade, kinder, and even up the other way, right? Okay, so those are things we're exploring right now. We had a dip in fifth grade. In sixth grade, we had a jump. So remember, sixth grade did well in ELA, but they also did well in math. So there might be some correlation. Maybe the students did well on the written portion of the math part, because now math is, remember we did the test back in the day, it was Scantron. Now a student has to actually write how they came up with the math solution that they got. And they're scored on that too. So it's not just that 2 + 2 = 4. They have to write how they got to that point. Okay, and they get scored based on that. So a lot of times people don't understand that, right? We always just kind of equate ourselves back to the test that we had. Okay, and so it's different. And then we see that, you know, again, in 7th and 8th grade, there's a slump, but in 11th grade, they jumped from a 15 to a 28. Okay, which is amazing, right? Okay, 13 points. Now that's huge, because those same students in 11th grade were the same students in 3rd grade. Okay, so they grew. So somewhere along the lines, right, we have breakdowns, instructions that we need to fix, but we're seeing that our students are showing that they can rise to the challenge, right? And this is a big shout out to the math teachers at the high school as well, because really that group of teachers meet all the time to look at the data to adjust how students are doing. They're doing it in real time, okay? This year, because of the board's investment in PLCs, we're actually doing that more intentionally. And so they're seeing that, right? So there's still a lot of work to be done, don't get me wrong, but we're trying to see some growth there. So congratulations to Principal Larkin here and his team, and also to the other grade levels that jumped, because it's super important, right? We're seeing some growth. So now what I want to do is kind of, I always do this, and I look at how do we compare against other districts, right? Likewise, just like we saw right now, the comparison of staff, we do the same thing with test scores, right? We're not going to compare ourselves to a huge district like Clovis, right? And we're not going to compare ourselves to Wakena, right? Even though they're similar students, it's different. Okay, so what we want to do is compare ourselves to like districts. So we use Olinda, Albert, Woodbridge. The reason why we use those is because they actually have a similar school model. Their schools are structured like ours. K1, 2, 3, some type of format that way, by grade level, right? Okay, that's how they're structured. And then the ones on the bottom are similar districts in size and kind of community population, right? So Blythe is on there because it mirrors us, right, in many ways. Because our Roseview, Farmersville, and McFarland are there. And what you can do is see how do we do in 18-19, 21-22, 22-23, and how do we compare to other districts, either similar models or same size, right? Same demographic, okay? And so, one thing I want to point out too, you might be asking, why is there a gap between 18, 19 and 21, 22 because of the pandemic? Okay, there wasn't data during that time, right? So we missed a lot. And that's one of the things that I do want to stress, and I'm almost coming up to a close in a few more slides, is that's where we're seeing some of the struggles with some of the students in middle school, right? That's where you're seeing some of this because there was not that instruction. But we're also seeing another group, preschool, TK, all the way to second grade, that weren't in a structured environment. Now they're learning how to get into that. And we're seeing a whole different need, right? That's the behavior side, right? The group that's in middle school is academic. They kind of reset on the behavior because they were here, but there's a whole cluster of students that are behavior and not academic, and that's what we're seeing right now. Okay, and it's across the board, right? It's not just using the. So here's a comparison of high school districts, of high schools, right? So Mr. Larkin, was excited. He came to me, he's like, let's help you compare against teams. I want to know, how do we compare to the Valley, right? And so we started to really look at that. And I want to just share this with you because these are stories that we need to be telling about our district, right? Portland's up at the top. In ELA for this year, we up all the way to the right, 23-24. We're at 58.77%. The state is at 55. We're beating the state by 13%, okay, the state average. In math, we're at 27%. The state is at, we're at 27.73. The state's at 27.9. We're only down by 0.17%. And now we're right there with the state. Pretty amazing. If we look at Sanger, and the reason why I use Sanger because they're tend to be a model high school, and so if we look at that, they're at 72% in ELA. We're almost right there, 68%. And remember, Sanger High is about 3,000 students right now. We're 950. So we're neck and neck with them. Okay. El Diamante in Visalia. The way this is apples and oranges because that area of town is a little bit different, right? In Visalia. They're at 70%, we're at 68.77 in ELA. All right, so we're doing well. We're neck and neck with them. The next school, high school that does well, comprehensive high school, Exeter, we're beating Exeter. Okay, we're number 3 in ELA on that list out of all the schools. Every other school that's on that list is scores are below ours. So that's something to be proud of. In math, same thing. We are 27.73, Sanger's 35.35, and then LA Honda is 22.91. We're 27. We're number 2 in math. We're leading El Diamante. Okay, and we tend to be, if we look, almost one of the highest, almost a little bit higher than us, right? And that's it. So we're again number 3 out of all those schools. Okay, it's almost larger. It's double the size of us. So we have some great work happening. Okay, it's how do we continue to have that happen throughout all the grade levels, right? Okay. So these are the LPAC scores. The LPAC are English learners, and they take this test, and I tell you, it's a hard test because they do listening, they do speaking, they do writing, okay, and they do reading. And actually, when they take this test, they have to say it the right way. Like actually even the answer, if they don't say the answer using the correct words, it's wrong. So it's super rigorous. It's not just like, this color is bad, it's blue. It's not that. They actually have to use like specific language choices, word choices. And if they don't, it's wrong. And I remember going to the training to score and having an argument with the person who's training. I'm like, that's wrong. Like, the kid said the same thing, I think the words boletos, and they said, instead of ticket, they used another word, but they were saying that we knew what they were saying, but I'm sorry, it's wrong. So kids get stuck here, right? That's why we want to make sure that in their home language survey, that if they're not truly Spanish speakers of their native language, that they don't put Spanish, because it locks them in, right? And then they have to take this, and then they're stuck, okay? So, in here, again, our teams done an amazing job, Ken and Liz and all the teams, the coaches. If you notice on the red, look, it's gotten bigger. Okay, that means that more of our students are scoring fours. In order for them to be redesignated, they have to score a 4 on LPAC. Okay, and then if we also look, the green is getting bigger, and the yellow and blue are getting smaller. That's what we want to see. Okay, so again, a lot of good work. Now, I'm excited because what we see this year, because our teachers are a lot more focused, right? Their curriculum is becoming more aligned. And so what will we yield there if we're already seeing this now? Okay. So the task force, this is fine. So these are grades 5, 8, and 11. Okay. And as you see here, we're kind of like we're not growing, okay? And we're not necessarily getting better, right? So we really need to focus here. This is tricky because remember when we took, if you took the Cat 6, the Scantron, and the books, it was tied to a science course that was at your grade level. What the CAS does is it takes all the elements of science and they try to crunch those into that one grade level, but they might not cover it during that grade level. So it's kind of a messy test. So what schools do, even with the science curriculum, like I know we did adoption of all that, with science adoption, they still have to supplement the learning, especially around like astronomy and those things, because that's not a part of that completely. So they have to provide supplements. So we're going to look at that, but really, truly, our primary focus right now is math and ELA, and then we'll incorporate science. So we're not going to forget about it, but we're going to incorporate it. Now, in a couple of years, and the pandemic kind of paused this, but we're going to see a history test as well. So just know that that's coming at some point. So it's not over. So students are getting tested quite a bit. Right? Now, this is one more last slide that I wanted to share with you, and I shared with this to the board before. These are 5 since suspension. And we're gonna share this quarterly as part of our quarterly report. Then when I came up and I said I'm going to be sharing a quarterly report with you, this will be around data. That's it. That's our focus. Are our kids doing what they need to do, right? And if not, what do we do to help them? And so this is trend over time, 5 since suspension, and we see that, you know, there's a lot of change, right? So overall, we're seeing some decline in suspension. We're seeing decline in year to date. So let's say, for example, in 5, in 23, 24 year to date, we had 21 in September. We had 21 in September. And this year we got 16. So we dropped 5 fights, right? Okay, and a lot of that was actually at the middle school. They've been doing a really great job of really focusing there. Okay, and again, like I said in my report, are fights still happening? Yeah. Were fights happening when you went to school? You know, and so those are going to happen. But the more that we can really focus and help students understand why they shouldn't be, that's where we want to be, right? Suspensions, same thing. Obviously, if there's less fights, there's less suspensions. Okay. And so that's that, and then you kind of see the trend there on the 5. You can see John Greer has a big change. The green is really small, and they had a bigger yellow. And then, you know, the high school this year had a big change because we had some issues at the beginning of the year, but those are kind of self-corrected, and the staff has been doing a really good job there. So we're going to see probably a trend downwards. Okay. So just a couple of things. Overall current actions, what are we doing? So overall, we're focused on PLC. That's what we're doing. The PLC work is not top down. We have a group of teachers at each school site. They're called the Guiding Coalition, and they work together with the principals to begin to implement PLCs. So it's really not top down. We're doing English language arts and math. They're both on the federal standards. I want to thank the board because we made a supplemental purchase on Wonders 2023. Our books were back from 2017, and so we're supplementing it. And also next year we'll see all elementary schools use the same curriculum. So that should also, we should see an uptick in student performance. What the teachers are saying about Wonders at the other two elementary schools, but on our screen, is that they like that the writing component is integrated into the curriculum, whereas before it was separate. So they're having to teach 2 separate things. Now it's integrated into one. And that was one of the big things. The other is that there's support in there for English learners, special education, and also advanced students. So they're starting to look and explore there as well, okay? And then at the middle school and high school, we're aligning to either CRWC, and that's helping because they have a common, learning that they do. And in fact, they were in there one day, and Mr. Ramirez and I were meeting, and we came to visit them, and they were in here. They came in to take a look at this training, and the teachers who were in here, middle school and high school, they're learning ERWC. Okay, so we're starting to see alignment. Whereas before, remember what their statement was, we're testing too much, and we have too much curriculum going on. So we're starting to align, okay? So that's it. And then in math, focus on assessment standards. One thing that we didn't put on here is the summer math camps. You guys remember those? Okay, we're going to have some in the spring. Okay, and that's to help students as well. Okay, and so it's part of the grant, and so it's to really help students progress. And what we're seeing from the students who went through the math camp, and this is all anecdotal data right now, but we'll have hard numbers, is that those students are performing better than their peers or even upperclassmen in their math class. Okay, so because we gave them the foundation, right, to do one. And then in behavior, what we know there, okay, is we're developing our MTSS framework. So we're working with Private Learning Solutions, and they came on Friday. And we have a group of teachers and site administrators that are working together. And what they're realizing is that it's complex. And what they've developed so far is the purpose, the why, and now they're getting into the teaming structures, okay? And then the last thing is we're focusing on building our behavior academies as part of the PBIS. So PBIS is not about hot Cheetos and candy, okay? It's not about that. It's not about the PBIS or the tickets. What it's about is helping students understand, hey, when I'm not behaving in a class, how can you help me get those skills, okay? Because if we're expecting a second grader to act like an adult, they're not going to do that, right? They're learning how to act like an adult. They're learning those skills. And if we just say, well, Andre's misbehaving, he needs to get out of my class, and we don't address the skill gap, the behavior skill gap, what am I going to do the next day when I come back? The same thing, right? The additional layer to that is some of our students are in environments where that's not even being reinforced. So we can teach them at school, but we also have to help the parents understand how they can reinforce it. Okay? And so that's another piece. So I just want to thank our staff, teachers, classified, our editors, our safety, everybody. All this is because of them. And so I want to thank them, our leaders that are here, and just all the work that they do. Any questions or comments you might have? Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment? Do we have any public? Action items, consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie? Aye. Tammy?
Aye.
Patty? Aye. And aye. Resolutions. Consider the approval of resolution number 1387, intention to convey easement to PG&E.
I motion to approve. I second.
Any discussion? Roll call, Valerie?
Aye.
Tammy?
Aye.
Patty? Aye. And aye. Administration, amend the 2024-25 Bret Hart Elementary School Handbook.
I motion to approve. I second.
I'd like it to be reviewed before it goes out, because it still says in the dropping off the salary line, or after that, the bullet points, and the third or fourth line, it says students who are picked up by the parent or guardian remain in the classroom. When gates open, please go directly to your child's classroom to pick them up. So that needs to be corrected before we shut that out with that.
Yeah, we'll take that. Thank you.
Roll call, Valerie?
Aye.
Tammy?
Aye.
Patty?
Aye.
And aye. Consider the approval of the School Services of California SSC proposal for consulting services, HR coaching.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Discussion. This coaching services work plan is dated September 26th. Can you tell me why it wasn't in the board packet to review?
Yeah, because what we were doing is, that date did not change because I was trying to work with them on some of the language in the folder, that's why. But they should have amended it wasn't, clerical error, it should have been amended to this time frame. And they were on vacation, so that's the lagging time, so we're waiting for them to get back in order to amend that clerical error on the date is, that's incorrect.
I'd like something like this, but I think for me, it would be a lot smarter to wait to see what we do with that HR department before we sit there and spend $28,800 for the next year in consulting services. So with that said, I'll amend my motion. I request that it be tabled for further review.
I feel the same way. I have a hard time with the $3,200 a month when we really can't afford what we're trying to implement with the HR now. It seems like it might be better to wait until we have one thing under control, then we're, logging new things to do. I just can't quite get my head around the whole situation, and I would like other comments if you have one on that.
I also noticed that we're using ESSER funds on this, and I know that it's allowed to use it for that purpose, but I think that money would be better spent directly on the kids instead of spending $28,800 for part-time consulting to a department, which I don't think really has a problem other than being short-staffed.
I really feel like what we've learned so far has been beneficial, but to think that we would use $3,200 a month, when we really can't go too much further than what we've gone with HR, and it just might be a good thing. If we didn't have to have a yearly contract, boy, I would be for it. We could point out our own shortages that we know where they are. And now that we have this report, and we could work on that one, but to have to do the whole year at once is a lot of money.
Yeah, they're going to take the feedback, and so I'm hearing to building on that kind of structure first, and then bring back and see what the feedback is. Yeah, that's fine.
Valerie?
Aye.
Sammy?
And that would be to table it, correct?
Yes.
Aye.
Patty?
Aye.
And aye. Future agenda items? Identify closed session topics. The following topics have been identified for closed session: conference with labor negotiator, personnel matters. Do we have any public comment on any of the closed session items? I have a motion to adjourn to closed session.
I'll motion. Second.
Roll call. Valerie?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
Heidi?
Aye.
And aye. We'll adjourn for closed session at 7:18.